This Three Beards Media podcast is sponsored by Revelton Distilling Company. When Rob and Chrissy Taylor started following the Kentucky Bourbon Trail in 2012, they fell in love with not only bourbon, but the entire distilling process. Just 8 short years later, in 2020, Revelton Distilling Company was opened, offering an entire family of products including vodka, gin, whiskey, and Revelton Shine. Come visit the tasting room at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa, where you can sample one of their many spirits, including 4 gold medal winners. Can't make it to Osceola today? Not a problem, as you can pick some up at your local Hy-Vee or Fairway grocery stores. Follow Revelton Distilling on Twitter or Instagram at ReveltonDC or their website www.reveltondistilling.com.
This Three Beards Media podcast may contain mature themes, and if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for you. Like the podcast. Nailed it!
Would you like to sample some of my nuts?
Hello, and welcome back to yet again another edition of Old Man Strength, a podcast of Three Beards Media, brought to you by Revelton Distilling Company and Kyle Lehman at Wintrust Mortgage. Go ahead and see Kyle for all of your mortgage needs, and if he can't help you, you can go ahead and find Revelton Distilling for all of your commiserating. I am Tim Johnson, joined as always. Actually, I shouldn't even say as always. I've kind of been a little bit MIA here, but I am joined by Chris Shipley. Chris, how are we doing?
Oh, it's so nice to have you back, Tim. It was tough having a co-host that was way better looking, smarter, and articulate than I am, so I'm glad you're back.
No, that is
I've been holding that
fair.
one for
that
2
is
weeks.
Absolutely fair. Yeah, I know. I could tell. I could sense that. No, it's been. I've had. Any number of things going on. In my personal life, whether that be power outages or just the fact that I am powerless as a person. So I appreciate that you guys were able to cover that for me. Obviously, like you said, smarter, better looking, more articulate, funnier, just easier to listen to than me. But unfortunately, our listeners get me back. So again, we appreciate you guys hanging in there. Chris, what is new with you?
You know, I don't want to keep it too long, but I'll just give this shout out. 6 months ago, my mom was in the hospital. She was doing not so great. Wasn't sure she was going to live through a surgery. And Saturday afternoon, she floated down the Maquoketa River with all of us for 4 hours and partied it up. And my mom might be the badassest woman I've ever met.
That is fantastic news. It's fantastic to hear. Also, I think badassest is the very weirdest.
It's a word.
It's a word. No, I know. Yeah, no, that's a conjugation I've not heard, but I will go ahead and take that. No, that is really awesome news.
She didn't correct me one time. I already missed Steph. She didn't correct me one time.
No, she was in her head. Trust me. No, that's fantastic news. That is really awesome. It warms my heart to know that she's been on the other side and that you get to spend time with her like that. My daughter spent some time with my folks about a week ago for a week, and it was very much fun to walk into the house to go pick her up after that week and just hear her giggling and know that she was doing that because she thinks that my folks are the greatest, because they are. So I very much appreciate that you get an opportunity to experience something like that with your mom. That is amazing.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Well, I tell you what, listeners, we'll go ahead and just let Chris jump in right here and just go ahead. I don't really want to chit chat anymore. Chris, why don't you go ahead and
No.
introduce our guest for this evening?
Nobody's tuning in to talk to us. So we are extremely grateful. We reached out and worked out some logistics and some time and some schedules, and was able to get former WHO TV 13 political director, managing editor, host, executive producer, all kinds of accolades. Dave Price, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on Old Man Strength.
Of course, it took me a while to prepare for the show, so I'm now ready.
I was just gonna say there's an opening for a fourth beard if you need a job.
That's right.
You've already,
I thought
your beard's already better than Aaron's. So
Well, yeah,
Well,
Dave,
yeah.
we appreciate you coming on the pod. Why don't you go ahead and, I mean, Chris kind of gave you his version of an intro, but why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
I'm a Leo. I like long walks on the beach. It's at sunset. Red wine, not white. Grew up in St. Louis area, so a lifelong Cardinals fan. If you know your baseball, you know who Whitey Herzog was, longtime manager for the Cardinals. My late father's mother, my grandmother on dad's side, babysat Whitey Herzog when he was little, along with his brother. So when I got to meet
wow.
Whitey at Principal Park years ago, I said, "Hey, I'm not a big autograph guy, although I did bring a ball there." And I said, "But for you, I'd really I really wanted to meet you." And I said, "Hey, my grandma used to babysit you and your brother back in New Athens, Illinois." And he's like, "Oh yeah, who's your grandma?" And I said, he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to tell Mary Lou," which is his wife, and Mary Lou grew up in that area too. So that's why, born in Cardinal country, and so lifelong Cardinal fan. Grew up on the Illinois side of the river in St. Louis. Went to undergrad at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville because of a girl who was a year younger and then dumped me. We were getting into that until the liquor starts flowing. Worked in radio in St. Louis, and then got my master's at University of Missouri, Columbia, and then worked in Alabama for about a year and a half, and then started in Des Moines 2001. Here I am.
2001.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tim.
No, I was going to say that's quite the path. But you've been in the Des Moines area for quite a long time now.
More years in Iowa than anywhere else. So yeah, that I realized at some point I transitioned from a they to a we when I talk about Iowa. And so since I spent more than half my life here, I figured I better start becoming part of the we.
2001, you've seen quite a bit of different changes and so forth in the landscape of Iowa,
For sure.
political spectrum and things like that. Just a question that I has always been in my mind, probably I would say for the last 5 or 6 years. So we'll kind of dive right into it here. The political climate in this country has changed drastically. In my
Did you just say
opinion.
crap? Was that a Freudian slip?
It was. Yes, it probably was. Yeah. It's delved into crap. Exactly. The climate's changed quite a bit. Where do you think the change happened, and what do you think led to where we're at now? It's obviously not just one event or one person.
Yeah. Or one part of it.
Or one part of it, right? But where do you think that has just kind of gone off the rails?
I think maybe a lot of factors. Social media, cable TV, the opinion media, if you will. I mean, you can just, what so many people grew up with watching the evening news, reading the morning paper, that kind of thing years ago. Now you have all these alternative sources for your information. And, you have some bad actors out there, that doesn't help anything for sure. But even if you just look at the folks who are partisan, which is totally fine, and they deserve to have their piece of the media landscape. But if you only get your information from just one specific individual source, I think a lot of people do tend to gravitate towards something that reflects what they maybe already think, then you're not getting all that information from all over the place. But I think really responding on social media, to me, that's been the biggest change, because that's that instantaneous response, right? Like, we can all joke about, how grandpa lost his filter, and just said whatever was on his mind, right? Well, that's social media for so many people, right? So, you just blast that out, whether you've thought stuff through or not. Plus, instead of you sitting alone in your apartment mad at something, now you put it out there, and if it blows up, who knows, maybe 1 million people are going to see it that night. And I think in so many ways, politicians are probably almost rewarded for the most bombastic, controversial, I'm going to own you, I'm going to rip you, you're an idiot, you're whatever. And they take everything that's here, and, you have to take it to this level, to make it the most whatever, he's the worst person ever. This is the dumbest idea, whatever. Everything is taken to that magnitude, and then they're rewarded by it because you get a little clip, goes viral, you use that for fundraising, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling thing. And I think a lot of times legacy media will be attracted to those kind of sound bites. And that's what you have a politician on your show and you do an hour-long deep dive into education. How much of that are you going to see in the evening news versus, so-and-so is an idiot and is in the pocket of whatever, throw out whatever cut down you want there. So I think they're rewarded for that kind of behavior financially and otherwise, and that's what's in right now. And it gets your base fired up, ticks off the other side, and then boom, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that point about, living in an echo chamber, it becomes that much more heightened when you have instantaneous feedback that says, oh, yeah, you're right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain amount where if I know I want to go get patted on the back for my opinion, I can go hop on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or whatever and say my thing. And all of those people in that echo chamber are not going to say that I'm right instead of, hey, Tim, shut up. This is a Wendy's. Like some of those those things that happen right now, I think it just becomes self-perpetuating for sure.
Mm-hmm. And so, where does it go? I don't know. I mean, the politicians will do what the public demands. Now, in most cases, you have, two choices in a race. So if they're both doing something you don't like and you're kind of a true swing voter, it goes back and forth, you're kind of screwed unless you're going to write somebody in, or maybe there's an alternative party candidate somewhere. But at some point, you would assume that if it goes too far, then somebody will use that as an opportunity. A candidate will embrace, hey, I'm not sleazy like the other guy is, and kind of run that route, and maybe there's a course correction. But we seem a long ways from that.
So what? Let me step back a second and talk a little bit more about you. What got you interested so much in covering politics as a journalist?
My dad was involved in politics at the local level. He volunteered. He used to be a Democrat, worked at the union. He was a union guy. So he worked at I think once a month, because we used to have one car back then. So we used to drop him off on Saturday mornings and he'd work at the union hall. And then when Reagan was president, then he kind of switched and became one of those Reagan Democrats, and then eventually was a Republican the rest of his life. But I think he was always a guy who read the paper, watched the news all the time. And, he was a high school dropout, went back and years later got his GED and then his associate's degree. Was always a super heavy news consumer. Really was not much into like cable news. I don't really remember him watching cable, but man, he watched local news nonstop, especially when he was retired, and especially when he was sick. He'd be sitting on the couch, so he would watch news and weather and sports all day long. I mean, he knew the Des Moines weather from St. Louis better than I did here, really. So he probably planted that seed, but there was a guy, my last, at the end of undergrad, who was it was a poli-sci major, and he really kind of lured me in, and then working in radio in between, I covered some politics, but then once I was at Mizzou, I started to really like politics. And for me, it's like, I'm a sports fan. I don't follow as much as I used to. Really, baseball is kind of my sport now, and I don't watch a lot of other stuff because I worked weekends for years, frankly. But I think sports and politics have some similarities with, you got the wins and winners, losers. You have the strategy, and I love strategy. I'm a strategy guy, so I probably care about a lot of crap in politics that people think they could care less about, but I'm always fascinated by strategy.
It's funny that you talk about your dad and how you used to watch it with him and things like that. There's a lot of similarities there with mine and my dad's relationship. My dad was a high school dropout, and he was a huge history buff, would read anything he could about history. And there would be times we would have conversations and he would just blow me away with what he knew. Mm-hmm. And we would watch every debate together and talk about the strategy and talk about who won or who made this point or whatever. We would watch election results together. And after he passed away, it was sad not to be able to do that with him, but kind of the same way, man. When he got older and he was retired, he was all in on watching the news. He would watch the news and CNN and Fox News. And he was a lifelong Democrat for as long as I can remember, except for I was thoroughly convinced that he voted for Reagan. He denied it to the day he died, but I'm pretty sure he did. But I remember there towards the end, I walked in one day and he was watching Fox News. And I was like, Dad, why are you watching this? And he's like, I got to keep up with what the enemy's saying. I mean, that was just his mentality. Mm-hmm. Instead of, to your point earlier, listening to some views of different views and so on. Now, again, at this point, Fox News was a little different than what it is now. But to be able to have an open mind and listen to other people's opinions and not be so toxic towards it and be okay to disagree, I think is what we're missing now today.
Agreed. And it's just, a lot of it is kind of baffling to me. It's like, especially if you're married, like, I don't know anybody who has a marriage where they get along 100% of the time. Maybe there's somebody out there, but man, I don't know what that couple is. And so I'm baffled by people, especially who are married, who have this kind of purity requirement for whatever their candidate may be, that they have to find somebody who is 100% what they want all the time. And they almost kind of, that's their guide star when it comes to politics. And, don't compromise on anything. Don't change your mind on anything. Don't really want to listen to the other side about anything. I do not understand how those people make it through life at work or at home, at church, anywhere. I just can't imagine that, but there are people like that.
Well, so that leads me to think about two things. One is I've always been baffled by single issue voters because any given issue is never going to be the thing that is affecting me at any given time. There are a billion different things affecting my life at a time. I can't, whether that be anything from abortion rights to healthcare to anything. All of the things I'm going through in my personal life right now are all over the map. I can't imagine anchoring myself so much to one issue that's the only thing I'm ever going to vote on. But then the other thing that it always makes me think about is the people who I feel like tie themselves so much to a candidate, maybe because of a single issue or whatever, that now all of a sudden, whatever that candidate says is what they believe. Kind of like it's that whole, NASCAR advertising. I use Tide because my favorite driver drives the Tide car type of like blind loyalty. And like neither of those makes sense, but it seems like both of those have become really prevalent. And I don't know if that's something that over your career that you've seen a change in, or what are your thoughts on that?
But I think if you think about the commercials that we see on TV in particular, and I suppose radio does it too, but maybe since I've spent more time in TV, I think through that lens, so much of what you see in a 30-second ad is emotion driven. And it's easier to focus on that one issue, that Tim is terrible because he opposes blank, or Tim is awesome because he supports blank, whatever. And, usually it's not Tim is awesome, it's Tim is terrible, because that's the kind of emotional fire that they do. You don't see, most of the time it's not positive ads unless it's a super PAC running some ads at the beginning that kind of build somebody's name ID or popularity.
Well, if Chris is running the ads, then it's definitely going to be Tim is awful. So let's just be clear about that.
And I would vote for an honest guy like Chris, who posted this.
So it's it's simplicity. It's so much easier to connect with you on just one issue that fires you up one way or the other. And there are those core issues that can really get you riled up. Like, a 30-second ad on tax policy or something, it's just not something you're going to see unless it's, the rich are screwing us all, like if it's kind of a populism kind of ad, or, Joe Blow is taxing us all to death or something like that. But it's not going to be nuances of, I think corporate rate shouldn't be 21%. It should be 34%. But, you're never going to see that. And so everything is just emotional driven. It's to piss you off. It's to get you all riled up. It's to get you fired up. And I think that's where a lot of this single issue stuff happens. Not to mention through the primary process, that's how the, candidates of the same party can separate themselves, particularly, on one core issue. So I think that's just driven a lot harder at us than it used to be.
So I'm curious, in the industry that you were in, the fine line that had to be played there between you as yourself as a political director, having no bias in your reporting, and having to keep that I don't want to say, impression, but that's what it is. That's your job.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but one side of your industry is over here taking money to run these political ads that do slant the truth and slant different lies and things like that. And some that are blatant. And you as a guy sitting there trying to do your job, but then on the other hand, you're being attacked because the media is biased and so on. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, and I think that's probably gotten more difficult. Now, I would say for me, you have to acknowledge that everyone has bias. That's the way I look at it. There are certain things that I know, like in my core, are hard to cover. So and some of this may sound a little silly, but I mentioned my dad. My dad died of lung cancer. He smoked for 60 years. And I can't really think of an issue where smoking really comes into play. Maybe I don't know, a 4-year-old should smoke. I just can't even think of what.
When they passed the no smoking, but casinos were still allowed to be smoking.
Yeah, casinos were
That's a good example.
Yeah, because casinos had the money, so they got themselves exempted, and they're still exempted somehow. So I have to think through like that one. All right, I got to make sure I'm not showing any bias there. My dad's best friend was killed by a drunk driver. Is there anything, if I'm dealing with a candidate who has drunk driving history or something like that, I got to make sure that I'm not clouded in that way. Those are kind of extreme personal examples, but and we all have personal feelings about abortion, marriage, taxes, education, whatever it is. But my goal all along was you have to try to give voice to all sides, and it's not always two sides. There could be multiple sides, so you have to keep that in mind. And now, do I feel like I need to go out of my way to make sure the KKK is represented tonight on the news at 6 or something? No, at some point you have to draw a line, and I suppose you're injecting your own personal views in that context. But our responsibility is to try to put as much out there as we can, vet it as much as you can, realizing that there is a human side to this. And when you start your day, you're collecting this much information, and what's going to air that night in the story is going to be this much here and this much here and this much here. And so you are serving as the gatekeeper. So you have to try to figure out what you think the most relevant portions of interviews or the day's developments or whatever are, and to try to put it out in a way that people can understand in the time that they're given to consume it. But the toxic side of this is changed so much the last 5 or 6 years in particular, I would say, where you have this just people blasting the messenger for things if they disagree with what your own personal feeling is. That's been the biggest change in this. And I try to push back at people, you know, when they would say, especially when we had the Insider Show on Sundays, you know, I'd have Kim Reynolds on or whatever. And if I ask a hard question, it's because I'm a Democrat. And if I don't scream at her during the interview, then I'm a Republican. And I've had people complain, like, especially the governor, because, you know, as the governor, we would try to interview her frequently or whenever we could. And I mean, yeah, sometimes we laugh. That doesn't mean I'm biased, but, you know, you can't laugh with a politician because it means, you know, you're in the bag for that person or whatever. You know, there can be no human side to this with some people. And some people just truly hate the other party. So Kim Reynolds, you know, for the Republicans, Democrats couldn't stand it. If it was Cindy Axne or whatever it was for the Democrats, it was the same way. And so there's this like almost visceral hatred that comes out sometimes. And that there's no doubt that stuff is hard. When people are coming at you like on a personal level and accusing you of all kinds of stuff and saying they know where you live and know about your family and all kinds of, I mean, it's, man, there's, you know, and you saw the meteorologist over at KCCI just left. Yeah. And I'm not friends with him, so I don't really know much of the background other than what's been told to me and what's been reported. And, you know, he dealt with a lot of crap because he talked about climate change, and there are people who don't believe in that or don't want to hear about it. And so he had threats, and I think there was a guy busted for it. And, I mean, it definitely gets ugly for sure.
I mean, I think one of the things that scares me the most is just the outright vilification of the press. Mm-hmm. I will show a clear bias here. The way that former President Trump talked about the press using things like the German Lügenpresse and things like that, like it really heightened a thing to where it delegitimized, for frankly a party that loves to say they're strict constitutionalists. They sure don't seem to understand the First Amendment. But it seemed like there was an absolute vilification that no matter if you were, you know, siding with this candidate or that candidate, where it just became trying to sow seeds of doubt that anything journalists talk about has any legitimacy whatsoever. And I think that to me is where it becomes really dangerous, because we've seen so much very obviously false misinformation, intentionally misleading misinformation. Like it's become you think of these Roger Stone types of people who brag about putting misinformation in the world, that are proud that they're trying to take down the press and things like that. I don't know how, for someone like you, how you even can look at that and feel like you have a choice that you can make on how to report on anything at some point.
Man, Donald Trump's a challenge, that's for sure. The enemy of the people that he does, I mean, that's brutal. And that singularly, since his emergence, I have never experienced the kind of stuff since he emerged on the scene, essentially in 2015. That's part of his shtick, part of his political entertainment, whatever it is, but obviously it has real life consequences. And so because of that, you get threatened and you get called names and people scream at us and enemy of the people and all kinds of crap like that. And yes, if the purpose is to sow distrust so that no matter what you hear in the legacy media, you just say, oh, they're biased, whatever. Yeah. And as I always say, everybody is biased. Literally every single person on the face of the earth. We all have our biases. Obviously, I also believe very strongly in a free press, that we could go on for hours with critiques about the media. But I also don't think that it does anybody any good to lop the media into, it's not just one, everything is the media. You're the media like this.
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson,
Right.
Rachel Maddow, the Des Moines Register, the Cedar Rapids Gazette, WHO Radio, whatever it is, they're all the media. There are a gazillion different kinds. And where it gets more confusing now is there's so many more kinds. I have no doubt there are people who work for traditional media organizations who demonstrate discernible bias in their work. Of course they do, because some people are better at hiding it and holding it back and overcoming it than others. But that's not an indictment on every single person who works in journalism. And journalism is different than the media too. I mean, a journalist is not a talk show host.
Yes.
I mean, there are different purposes, there are different meanings, different intents. So yeah, I mean, that stuff is incredibly harmful to us as a society, because we have a chunk of people, too many people, if they think they can just blow all of that off, and whoever their Facebook source is or their whatever source, some wacky website, because it says something that they're like, oh yeah, okay. Look at all the stuff about COVID that got out there, that we're having chips implanted into us and all kinds of stuff. No question, big picture, there was stuff right about COVID. There was stuff wrong about COVID. Some decisions were right, some decisions were wrong, and we'll probably debate those for years, and wherever the heck the origin is and how it came out, why it came out, all that stuff. But obviously there are just wackadoodle stuff that have come out too. Some people are coming back from the dead, or they never were dead. And I mean, some of it's bonkers, but you have people, because of the way they receive the information, they think that's true.
Well, JFK will be announcing that JFK Jr. will be announcing that he is running for vice president here very soon. And also, I just learned today that there are 2 women that came back from Turkey without any kidneys after cosmetic surgery. So I know that is absolutely true.
And clearly, my Wi-Fi and my chip and my COVID works much better than Tim's.
I think one of the questions I have for you as you think about the fact that yes, it's been trying to delegitimize the legacy press. I think some of those things have not done themselves any favors by large corporations taking over and downsizing, and local media has by and large gotten gutted compared to what it used to be in the role that it had to play. I think when you look at all of these other kind of sources, what role can you play in helping to reform the narrative or change the narrative, or maybe you can't. Maybe that's where you find yourself at right now, where you don't know what else you can do to help recenter people on, just getting facts reported.
That is a window into my soul right now, actually. That is very much what I'm doing. So on my what's next will most likely for the short term be a combination of a couple of pieces, most likely. One of them, I started writing a column a couple of weeks ago, which is something I had wanted to do for a while. There's this group called, which I did something with them today, which is why I have their shirt on today. It's called the Iowa Writers Collaborative, and it's a group of independent writers that all works independently. They all work on their own on the Substack platform, but this collaborative is kind of the unifier, and then helps support and helps promote all the individuals as a group. And so it was formed, and I'm not one of the organizers, so I'm going to speak a little out of turn, but the way it was explained to me, it was formed, kind of during COVID, people all shut down and all that stuff, but then kind of big picture looking at what's happened to the media landscape, newspapers disappearing, other entities being downsized, not locally owned, all those kind of things. And what can be done in our state to make sure that important issues are covered and are spotlighted and information shared, all those kind of things. And so I signed on as a columnist. So I've been doing it 3-4 weeks. And so this is a wordy way to answer your question, but that is going to be one small piece of what I want to do. So I want to dig into things kind of one thing at a time, in the sense. And so I'm not doing, a million things at once, which that's kind of the fun part about being a reporter, is that you learn a little about a lot of things most days until you can get into a specialized thing. I was fortunate that I was been able to specialize in politics here through different managers, different ownership groups, all those kind of things. And primarily that's what I got to do while I was here in local TV. Now, sometimes I still have to go cover a car wreck or a burning building or a double murder or something. But for the most part, I got to prioritize politics, which was awesome. And we've gotten to experience all kinds of things. But even that can be, so much. So the Substack, I can kind of drill in on one thing. And some of the different projects that people have talked to me about are similar in that way. Because I want to look at it like, as I look into a mirror and realize that this part here is a different color than what it looked like when I was 25 in grad school at Mizzou. It's a reminder to me that I've been here for a while. And if my 7-year-old daughter weren't so freaking cute and persuasive, I probably would have shaved it by now. But
I think you should keep it, Dave. I mean, it makes the man.
I don't.
Or it covers.
I was gonna say it.
But not a man.
It suits you. Yeah, it suits you. It works well.
It's just, man, this really gets at the ego here.
You got to get it a little bit past that, Dave. Get a little bit past that, and you're good to go.
Yours is longer, Chris, and my daughter would totally love you. That's what she wants. No offense to you, Tim. But
oh no, I have very frequently had a very long beard. I've actually only recently been trimming it back up short to be.
So she loves that. So she's the reason I have it.
Yeah.
Where the heck were we going with this? My gosh. Anyway,
your what's next?
Yeah, my what's next. So as I talk to different people have approached me about different ideas, and I'm trying to be very intentional with each thing we either agree to or not agree to look at. And, at some point, as I sit here in my home, we've got a mortgage to pay for, so it's not like I can have a year-long vacation and do nothing. But I'm trying to, everything I do, I kind of want to be intentional and deeper about some stuff. If I have a way to combine using my experience in journalism, covering politics, I like public policy, and I have watched my wife just explode this nonprofit where she works in maternal health. It's a nonprofit called Healthy Birthday, and it's about tracking babies' movements in the third trimester, which is how we knew our son, older of our two kids, how he was in distress when he was only about 21, 22 weeks along. So we have a personal connection to it. But to watch how Emily has exploded that, I also know that nonprofits are a big part of solutions, honestly. So I'm looking at a variety of different things about how to best focus and use the experience I've had here to kind of dig into some stuff, and some stuff that I maybe couldn't really get into before because of the realities of, doing daily TV. And honestly, like something like this, I mean, the new media world, man, while we can go crazy about all these buffoons who are on here saying ridiculous stuff that's not true and that are, intentionally telling people stuff that's not correct and how much harm that does, there are so many other really well-intentioned people who can get together, who can find their niche, whatever it is, and can dig into an issue. It can be deep stuff, it can be entertainment, it can be sports, it can be beer, it can be anything. And I'm fascinated by the new media world. And for as much as people dog it, I really think new media technology will be what can drive us forward?
Well, I think that Sean Roberts, who is on the radio at KXNO, was at we had a live episode event down in Osceola. And at the time, Three Beards Media probably wasn't even a thing. And it was just Tim and I's little podcast that we were doing. And he was doing one with our friend Aaron called Bitter Units. And Sean said something in between a break. I had said to him, I said, man, I always would love to just be able to be on the radio and do a cyclone reaction show. Like that would be my dream, just to do a call-in show. And he's like, Chris, you have that ability now. Nothing's stopping you from being able to do that. And as the months went on and Tim and I and Aaron started to talk about why can't we do something on our own? And this show here that we're on has evolved from Tim and I getting on here and just talking about being dads and our families to interviewing interesting people and helping people learn more about them that doesn't necessarily know about them, right? So our next section that we're going to talk about, I would love to talk more about you growing up in St. Louis and your dad and things like that. So it certainly is not something I ever thought that we would ever be able to do when we connected on Twitter one day and said, hey, let's do a podcast.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, when you're talking about dads, like that's just another great example of it, right? Because that's not something you're going to see in the 10 o'clock news. But I mean, is there anything more frightening than being a dad? I mean, seriously.
Being a dad of a teenage girl?
Yeah, we're not there yet, fortunately.
No, I was literally warned by a friend this weekend about my daughter is 8, and so we're not there yet. But she was going through some things, and it was like, oh no, Tim, just be ready. Yeah. I'm like, oh no, I will never be ready. Yes. I will never be ready. I don't know how to be ready. Like I want to be. Like I'm not trying to say that I'm not going to address things or have conversations, but that doesn't mean I have any clue what the F I'm talking about.
Yeah, and you just think about all the stuff that's freaked you out in life. You know, high school, there was some stupid test, or you're an uncoordinated kid in PE and you didn't know how you're ever going to get through it. All this stupid stuff. Couldn't find a prom date. Whatever the heck stressed you out. Then you get married and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. Whatever is coming up, whatever. I just don't know that other than maybe like health, I don't know what could just put you to wit's end more than parenting. When the baby's crying, your first kid, and you're like, man, what in the hell is happening? Like we've tried everything here. And then you find out, oh, it's because, he's teething. Did you realize that he's buffoon? Right. And you're like, oh yeah, of course. But I feel like, guys suck, right? We're terrible communicators. When you ever open up to your buddy where you're like, holy crap, man, we had a kid. I'm over my head. I don't know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. But, like this can be a thing where guys get together, parents get together, right? Like I tell my wife, every guy especially, but every parent, I'm always hoping that in a conversation with them, there's some little nugget that I'm going to get out of there that's going to make life better here, that we're going to see something happening. Like you're talking about the teenage years. My son turns 13 next week. So, you're going to have all the hormonal stuff and all that crap we're going to have to deal with. And then my daughter's 7.5. So she'll be going through that stuff years later too. And it's like any little nugget I can get to try to make this journey easier, I'm going to get. So you do your Two Dads podcast and I'm right there.
Well, I'll tell you, the absolute best advice I can give you being a dad to a girl is when they come to you and they have a problem or they're complaining about something. And as a man, your initial reaction is what? Solve it. That's not what they want. Exactly. They just want you to just shut up and let them complain and moan about it. Whereas I got 17 other things I could be doing. Let me just solve this so I can move on to the next thing. And it took me quite a few years to learn that from Caitlin before she finally said, you need to seriously just shut up and just let me vent for 10 minutes and then we can move on.
Man, I've been trying forever to get you to just shut up. I can't believe that's all that takes.
I know, right?
Well, Well, Dave, why don't we go ahead and take a quick break here? We want to go ahead and make sure our sponsors get some words in here. We got a few more things we kind of want to cover, but as Chris alluded to, we want to make sure that we get a little bit more into a little bit of who you are and what made you, I guess. So, with that in mind, we'll go ahead and grab a word from our sponsor.
At Revelton Distilling Company, everyone has become a part of the Revelton family. From the Taylors and their daughter who helped perfect their award-winning gins, to the team who installed Lucy, our 33-foot-tall custom-made still, right down to the local farms that provide our coveted corn, and even the cows on those farms who consume our mash byproduct. Want to see the farm to flask come to life? Now you can tour Lucy and find out where we take Iowa's harvest and transform it into our finest spirits. Choose between a 45-minute tour or find out even more by scheduling a VIP behind-the-scenes tour to get the taste of the full Revelton experience. You can visit them at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa, or find all of Revelton's award-winning spirits at any local grocery or spirits retailer.
So, Dave, before that little break, Chris was talking a little bit about how he wanted to learn a little bit more about, you talked a bit about getting a political bent from your dad. But that can't be the only thing that maybe shaped you into, like, what made you want to be a journalist?
I wanted to do that forever. I think probably when I was little, I dreamed about playing shortstop for the Cardinals. My dad actually did not let me play baseball as a kid. He was convinced that coaches would not watch out for kids. It hurt my arm. So he wanted me to wait till high school. And by then it was way too late. And I was so small anyway. When I started high school, I was just a little runt. And so I was so behind on things. There was no way that was ever going to happen anyway. But when I was in grade school, my best friend Mark and I would do pretend newscasts into a tape recorder. So I wanted to do it way back then.
You were the original podcaster.
I was. Two nerdy kids in grade school who were looking for an outlet so that all of their little nerdy tendencies could actually be rewarded with something that made sense. But I think, man, going back way, way, way back then, I think it's just something I always knew I wanted to do. And we really did have news on all it. My dad and mom did too. We'd have the local news on in the evening, and everything kind of revolved around, if it's 5 o'clock, the news is on, then 5:30 national news, 6 o'clock local again, and then 10 o'clock news, and then bed. But I watched news from when I was little. We always got the local paper. The radio, AM radio was on in the morning. So I think I was just always surrounded with it.
Were there people that you looked up to or people you wanted to emulate or anything like that when it came to that growing up?
When I was really young, I listened to Jack Buck on the radio doing the Cardinals games. And so I did want to be a sports guy for a while. After the Cardinals, I think I was smart enough as a kid to know I was never going to be a Cardinal. So then I wanted to be a sports guy. And I probably wanted that all through high school. And then in college, there was a paid job available at the campus radio station to work in news. And the news director had heard me on the air as a DJ. Said, "Hey, have you ever thought of news?" And then that was kind of the transition to news. And so really just stuck with it after that. And, as far as who I looked up to, it was probably the main anchors in St. Louis who I used to watch.
So your dad, I assumed you watched a lot of Cardinals games with your dad.
We didn't go to a lot. We didn't really have any money, so we didn't. I used to get tickets every year. They had this deal with the schools and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch newspaper, And if you got straight A's, you could get 2 free tickets every year. And so that's usually when we went. So I would get 2 free tickets, and then Dad and I would go. And I don't know if I ever went with my mom, but we did, I think, a few times over the years as a family. But primarily it was just, oh yeah, that's what I took mine, and then my brother had his 2 tickets. So I think that's how the 4 of us would go. And then once my other brother and sister came along, we had too many of us to all go. But we would go maybe to 1 or 2 a year, probably.
What's your best memory with your dad?
Dang, you're gonna get too deep on me. Probably holding my son. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. Is your dad still with us?
He is not.
Yeah, my dad passed away 11 years ago last Monday. So might be the reason why I'm asking questions like that. But
yeah, mine was 9 years ago in April.
I do like that idea though of holding your son. Some of we live in a different world now. Like, I go to my parents' house and they've got boxes full of photographs, and I don't have boxes full of photographs because that's not a thing people do anymore. But I've got a Dropbox full of pictures and all of this stuff, and I've got a lot of pictures that are completely worthless, and I need to go through and I need to delete them, and whatever. But the ones that I treasure very much are like watching my daughter sit on my dad's lap. When I went down to see my folks, when my daughter had spent a week with them, and seeing my dad and my daughter making each other laugh the entire time, those types of things are really just kind of it gives a whole different appreciation, I think, for your parents when you see the way. Because one thing that they're your parents, it's another thing to see the way they are with your kids, and it just makes it a whole another depth, I think.
Yeah, and they're and I always laughed with it because like I watched my dad screw around with my son, and now my son's only going to be 13, so he didn't get very many years with my dad. In the last 2 years my dad was sick, but he would goof around with him and stuff. And then like with my mom, I was joking with her because this was probably 2 or 3 years ago. So we stayed down at mom's house, and we have a daughter. So it's the 4 of us going down there, my wife and the 2 kids. And mom makes dinner like she always did. So when we go to my mom's house, we almost always have homemade dinner because that's how it always was growing up. Mom always cooked, and it's still that way. She loves having all of us kids back. And she realized that, she makes this big dinner, and my siblings are there with their families and all this stuff. So you're all packed into this house, and it's like 8:45. And she's like, I forgot to get the dessert out. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's brownies. And so my daughter's name is Lila. Lila, come out here. Let's get dessert, whatever. I'm like, Mom, Lila's about to go to bed. We can't give her brownies. And my daughter is kind of like my wife, like chocolate for summer, the caffeine in chocolate or something, I don't know, late at night kind of screws them up. So after about 6:30, my daughter can't really have chocolate, or it just totally screws her up. And I'm asking my mom, I'm like, can you name one time growing up that 10 minutes before bedtime you gave us brownies?
Yeah,
and she's like, no, but I'm not putting Lila to bed. You are. I'm like, yeah. I'm noticing that there are a lot different rules for grandma versus mom, and likely, grandpa versus dad. So I think that's one of the coolest things about being parents, is seeing your own kids being with your parents and just seeing that bond. And, it's like impossible not to look at that, to be like, man, mom would never let me do that, or dad would never put up with that. And like when my dad was watching TV, we had to be so quiet, and we had a small little house and 4 kids. And so you'd have to go in the other room. We didn't have it was a small 3-bedroom ranch, and there's no like entertainment room to go into. There's no basement to go into. Like you had to go into your bedroom that you shared with your sibling. Like, and it's so that dad could hear the news or whatever he was watching, right? You couldn't be screwing around making all kinds of noise. And like you go there now, the grandkids are running around and crazy and all this stuff, and it's like there's no way you would have put up with that.
On a nightly basis.
Absolutely. Yeah,
On a nightly basis.
My folks have 9 grandchildren, and when you go over to their house, because I live in Minneapolis, and my sisters live very close to my parents. So when I get to see all of them together, I'm the one staying overnight. So when they all leave, and the house just feels insanely quiet, and I'm very relaxed, and they have a very different, like they're almost sad that it's that quiet. And I'm like, that's never anything that you would have put up with before. But I also appreciate what you said about just like the way that they use food as an expression of love. When I was down the other weekend, it was for dinner. It was just going to be me, my 8-year-old daughter. I think maybe a niece or two was going to be over, and my parents. And that's it. And they had gotten like 6 6-ounce burgers and 6 4-ounce bratwurst and like 20 ears of sweet corn. And I was like, nobody here is like preparing for their junior year of wrestling. I don't understand who you think you're feeding. Like, oh no, you think your daughter isn't gonna want both a hot dog and a bratwurst? I'm like, that's 10 ounces of meat. No.
One of the best lines my dad told me once, my oldest was just out of control, and I had kind of yelled at her a little bit, and my dad goes, hey, don't you yell at that little girl. And I was like, what fucking house are we in? You yelled at me every day of my life. And he goes, and that was wrong. Shut up. Come on. Also, my daughter would not come home from my grandparents one time, and she was hiding in the living room behind the couch because she didn't want to go home with me. And she said, I just want to live at Nana's house for the rest of my life. And I was like, listen, that's not the deal you want to sign up for. Yeah. This whole thing's a facade. It's not real. Get your ass in the car. We got to go home. So there's no doubt about that. Tim, why don't we do Kyle Lehman's Wintrust mortgage question? Then we can see if we can wrap up. How's that?
Yeah, no, that sounds perfect.
Our sponsor, Rob Taylor, is actually watching. He just texted me, said that Dave and him are pretty good friends. So, Dave, he asked me for you to stay on the line after we're done because I need to ask you a question. So,
okay.
Stick around after that. So, Kyle Wintrust is our other sponsor. He sponsors the Wintrust Mortgage question of the pod. So, I'm going to ask you a question, Dave. Then we're going to hear an ad from Kyle that'll give you about 40 seconds to think of an answer, and then we'll come back to your answer. So a lot of pressure. Kyle Wintrust mortgage question of the day is you have a magic time machine that you can go back 10 years and talk to Dave Price from 2013. What piece of advice are you going to give him? So let's hear an ad from Kyle, and then we'll come back with your answer, Dave.
Okay.
Are you in the market for a new house and unsure of the mortgage process? Want to know that you have someone looking out for you? Kyle Lehman from Wintrust Mortgage is a down-to-earth, knowledgeable lender who can be there for you in your corner. He can work with you in any of the 50 states and is just what you need to expand your home search. Kyle will work with you through the entire process with little to no work from you. Take the worry of the mortgage process out of the equation so that you can focus on looking for your dream home. Contact Kyle at www.wintrust.com/Kyle-Lehman or call him at 515-473-0546.
And we're back. So, Dave, I asked you the question before Kyle's message. You have a magic time machine. You can go back and talk to Dave Price in 2013. What piece of advice are you going to give him?
I think it would involve patience with kids and with raising young kids. I just feel like there are times when, you're about to lose your mind because the baby's been crying all night or whatever it is, or they're going through some stage. And when you talk to older parents who have gone through all of this, they can be like, oh yeah. Like I remember with our son, he was like 11 months old before he slept through the night. And by that point you're just feeling completely worthless. And especially as the dad, I'm totally worthless because I have nothing to feed the kid, So 11 months, he finally starts sleeping through the night. And then like at a year and a half, a little bit after that, he regresses. And then, so after sleeping through the night, it's back to the craziness again. And you're like, oh my gosh. But of course, if you actually take the time and talk to people about what's going on, you find out it's not, your kid is not the only one in the history of the world who's done this. And I just feel like there's so much that if you can just pause for a second in the heat of the moment and get some perspective about it, that will save you some mistakes. And that's probably what I would tell myself.
It's good advice.
I like that.
Sure.
I tend to, with my friends, actually try to make sure they feel like they are the only parent going through that and that they're doing something wrong. I feel like that just keeps them on their toes, because then I can always feel like the superior parent. It's not healthy for any children whatsoever, but it makes me feel good about myself. So that tends to be what I do.
Nice.
On the flip side,
I really appreciate that. Oh no, go ahead, Chris.
That's right. On the flip side, as they get older and they're like 18 and still living in your house and won't go to bed and are staying up all night, and you wake up the next morning and half your refrigerator is eaten, you're 100% justified in yelling at them. Just
yes,
100%. Talking to you, Joshua and Jordan. Or at least that's what I'm going to tell my therapist on Friday.
That's right.
Yeah. Dave, I'll ask you one question. Sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think I want to ask you one more question from the previous segment, just because I don't want to dive too much into politics. I just want to dive more into history. 2020, we saw COVID. We saw the George Flag tragedy. We dealt with an election with record turnouts, and then the election lies and the big lie and things like that. Would you say that's the biggest news year that you have probably covered, as far as major storylines that all intertwined into one just complete mess?
I would agree. I think that period, however long that is altogether, for really that 2-year stretch or whatever the heck that was, it just was so intense, so nonstop, that yes, I think so. And so impactful, because all of those things impacted so many people in our country, both short term and longer term. So I think without a doubt, that's been the biggest period of my entire career.
It certainly feels like the longest when I think about everything that happened in 2020. Particularly living up here in Minneapolis, 2020 felt like it was about 3 years long, and it felt like it was just every single day something thrown at you. And now it's gotten to the point when I try to think, like, it really was like 2019 to 2022. The January 6th stuff that came up, that wasn't 2020, right? Like there was this whole other extension of all of that stuff, but we all kind of lump it into this era. And it really makes me wonder how historians are going to write about this time period, because we know that, the saying is history is written by the winners and, things like that. But you think about, to tie it back to what we were talking about earlier, is that you guys as journalists are trying to be the voice of the time, that the historians will likely use your words to help explain what happened at the time. And if we're discrediting the voices of the time, how does history write about these types of things?
Right.
And so it just seems like there's so many narratives. So I guess my question out of all of that is how do you think history will look at that at 2020?
probably is a mess. I mean, I think it will, maybe it'll be similar to what the country endured in the 60s and some other periods of time, World War II, maybe. I mean, they're significant for different reasons. But, I mean, January 6th, tested our country in ways that are hard to come up with parallels. And, obviously you still have some people who, it seems in their core, think that the attackers were justified. Mm-hmm. And they think that they're fighting for the future of the country. And, it's challenging to deal with people who believe like that. And, I've had coworkers who think I'm nuts for engaging with certain people. And I'm not big for, I don't like doing Twitter wars or Facebook wars or whatever, going back and forth with people and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes on email, it lends itself to a little more thought in that with it. And I will go back and forth with people on things. And sometimes it does, I think sometimes the other person can understand you better and maybe you can find some kind of common ground. And truthfully, there's sometimes people will say things to me that, because of a tweet or a line in a story I had or something like that, I didn't intend it to come to, sound a certain way, but somebody took it that way. And so, I have to take that into consideration. Sometimes you go back and, kind of change things. I'm hoping with all of this stuff, maybe it's one-on-one conversations with people that we're going to slowly work our way through this. Look at all the conspiracies that were out there that Donald Trump was going to take over the White House again on April, whatever the heck it was, and then on this and on this and on this. And you already mentioned JFK coming back. I mean, certain things like that, you would assume that at some point, some of the people at least are going to be like, okay, maybe this stuff's all crazy. Like this didn't happen, this didn't happen, this didn't happen. So maybe what I'm hearing is just a bunch of crap. And so I'm hoping that on some of this stuff, or that, we're not all injected with whatever from the COVID vaccine or whatever. I mean, if you don't get a COVID vaccine, that's your choice. But, so some of the other stuff that came out, that we were being injected with and stuff, hopefully one-on-one conversations with people, that's how we're going to plot our way through this, because that's the only way that I could have any kind of optimism, because the disinformation side
just as long as we all just as long as we can all agree that QAnon is real, we do believe that, I think we're going to be okay.
That is one way to live your life.
No. Well, Dave, I really appreciate you being here, lending your insight, just being a little bit open about who you are and what made you who you are. I guess I'm going to leave you with one final question, because you gave advice to yourself, but if you is there one nugget or one piece of go-to advice that you feel like you use when giving someone else the Dave Price wisdom?
Firm but fair. That's what I was very fortunate to be able to hang out a little bit with Tim Russert. He used to be the longtime moderator for Meet the Press. A couple of different times they did Meet the Press out at Channel 13 in Des Moines. So I would see him at that, or if he came in town for some big event or whatever. So I got to hang out a little bit with him. And that was really his mantra to me that I picked up, was firm but fair, which was really what I've tried to do. I really got more comfortable being myself more with politicians, with interviewees and such, because I watched what he was like both on camera and off camera. And I realized that it's okay to just be yourself. And I watched the way he talked to these politicians during the commercial breaks. And as silly as it sounds, it was kind of eye-opening, because you're like, man, this guy is just a good dude. And and I thought he was that way on the air to begin with, but man, seeing the way he was during the commercial breaks where, talking about their families or their sports teams or their kids, whatever it was, the weather, it just didn't matter. Like he put his guests at ease, I think, like that too, but it was just made the conversation and the whole experience real. And so that's what I think I probably try to do that in, the aspects of life that I can, the firm but fair, and try to be authentic in everything we do. And right now, I suppose that means growing an old man beard.
Perfect.
No, absolutely. We're very happy to see it. It suits you.
We'll find out if I can make it through July with it.
You can do it. Dave, as usual, Tim likes to skip this last part, which is Steph Copley, who is also on your Substack in Red's column on there. She's been a contributor here. And on her episode, she told Tim to shut the fuck up because Tim wouldn't stop talking. And,
that's how that went down.
It's exactly how it went down. She even confirmed it last episode.
She literally said the opposite.
That's not how I remember it.
Oh, I know. That's how a lot of this goes.
Anyways,
good Lord. Okay. Anyways,
we have a segment here where we kind of do a partial donation to the Young Women's Resource Center here in Des Moines in honor of Steph. So we'll play an ad, show a QR code if people are watching, scan and go donate to them. And then when we come back, we will shut up and you get to say whatever you want without us interrupting whatsoever. So it's carte blanche. You can say whatever you want.
Okay.
Hey everybody, it's Steph Copley, the woman behind the STFU segment on the Old Man Strength podcast. When I told the guys I wanted to sponsor this segment, they recommended that I make a charitable donation instead, so that's what I did. I chose the Young Women's Resource Center in Des Moines, Iowa. They're a nonprofit that supports, educates, and advocates for girls and young women ages 10 to 24. Their whole goal is to make sure that these young women become strong, self-confident, and successful. And if you know me at all, you know that aligns with my goals as well. If you're interested and would like to donate, check them out at ywrc.org and donate today. And remember, don't forget to STFU and listen every once in a while. Thanks.
All right, Dave, floor is yours.
All I would say is thanks to you guys because I've enjoyed the conversation. I think my appeal to everybody would be in light of the things we talked about. If whoever you think is out there in the media landscape doing it the right way in your mind, do what you can to support that person. I think, as you mentioned earlier, we have giant companies owning a lot of bigger and bigger chunks of the media landscape. And so people are looking for other ways to do independent, do their own thing, whatever, be part of other things. Support those people. Like, go out of your way to support those people. Encourage advertisers to support them so that these people can make a living and can make an impact. There are a lot of people out there brainstorming about things, and obviously I'm selfish about this because I'm one of them brainstorming these things. But if you have somebody out there you respect and you think can do things the right way and you want to see more of it, try to go out of your way to support that person and to share what that person is doing with other people so they can also try to support those people. Because I really do think that's how we're going to get at some of the bigger issues facing our communities. We can get a lot more storytelling out there, a lot more fact finding, a lot more conversation. We can do things in unique ways, whether it's new technology, whether it's legacy media, whatever it is. But just try to support the people you think are doing it the right way, and don't typecast everybody that everybody sucks. Everybody does not suck, and some people are out there working really hard trying to do it the right way. So if you can, try to support what they're doing.
Good deal.
Well said. Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, Chris, anything else that you want to cover with Dave?
No, I think we are at a great spot.
Yeah, I very gracious, Dave, that you spent the time
Thank you
talking
both.
with us. We very
course.
much Yeah, we very much appreciate it. This has been fun. I hope we get to continue to have these conversations, and I'd love to bring you back on and have you dissect, maybe some individual things as we're entering an election cycle here very soon, as we're entering a lot of other things. Any type of insight I can glean.
That sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Excellent.
Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listeners, you have spent way too much of your time already listening with us. We very much are very grateful that you are here. Please go ahead and check out our sponsors, Revelton Distilling in Osceola, Iowa, and Kyle Lehman at Wintrust Mortgage. Go ahead and check out all the other content on the Three Beards Media platform. We have so much great content. We have a lot of new content coming at you as well. We're continuing to grow the amount of podcasts in our stable. Chris, do you have anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, the new Hawkeye Reaction Show. They're going to record their first little teaser episode Thursday night at 6 p.m. live on these platforms, and then it'll be on all of your podcast audio feeds as well. And then watch out for our social media. We have a new little weekly video that we pulled out called the Revelton Rumble Spirited Discussions. We're going to pull some quick little snippets of each show and show you some highlights. So that'll be fun too, and another way to get our sponsor out. So thank you guys, everybody, for listening and for tuning in.
Well, we appreciate it, listeners. And with that, we will see you guys next time.